Hello, everybody. Welcome back. What a great first talk. We've had a bit of coffee ready for number two. Talk number two is the inner workings of cyber defenders. We've got Mark here and Nathaniel from Cyberproof. They're going to be going through their talk, and then most importantly, the best bit, we've got questions at the end. So please don't forget to put your questions in throughout the talk, especially within the last 5 minutes once you've consumed most of that information, so we can pose those questions to the both of them at the end. Now, I'm not going to do any intros because they're on their way. So that is the end of me. Let's go straight into the Cyberproof talk.
Good morning, everybody, and we're great to have you with us during this session. The session is good. We call it the inner workings of cyber defenders. So security threats, as we all know, are really on the rise, and the security operation teams really need to adapt quickly to collaborate and to communicate amongst multiple teams. So in this webinar, we'll take you through 3 attack scenarios that we came into contact with last year. So these are real live events where different teams within our organization work together with our customers. And these included L1, L2 analysts, security engineers, incident responders, and threat intelligence analysts working together to mitigate these attacks. So in this webinar, I'd like to introduce you to Nethaniel Ribco. He's a senior cyber threat intelligence specialist, and Mark Vaitzman, who is the senior analyst here at Cyberproof. And the things that we're going to cover here are some of the techniques used by the various teams, how they did that based on different types of attacks, how to capture relevant data, both internal and external, and really to deep dive into some of the really effective methods of communication and of workflow processes to increase visibility in operations collaboratively. So we're going to go on to the next slide. Okay, so essentially, we're going to go through 3 scenarios: detection of targeted mouse spam campaign exploiting data leakage. Second scenario, an investigation of a black marketplace using Azure alt malware to sell employee credentials. And the third one will be an EDR detection of ICE ID Trojan infection. So these are the 3 scenarios we're going to look. We hope that you find it interesting. We are going to have a live FAQ after this session, so please save them up, and hopefully we can answer your questions. So I'm now going to hand over to the teams.
So we're going to be here a bit nerdy and show our teams as icons, but these icons, I really like them, and I think these icons really represent correctly our teams. So I'll start with the L1 analysts, the frontline infantry. These are actually the swordsmen. They are the first line of defense in nearly every SOC. This team is actually going through a tangled field of alerts 24/7, looking for suspicious indicators in the alerts they get from different security systems, usually in the same SIEM. This team usually has a basic operation system and network understanding. On the other hand, they do have trained well, and they're aware of up-to-date attack techniques and campaigns. And one of their main roles is getting the incidents escalated in time with the relevant indicators they found to the next teams, which is usually the L2 analysts. So the L2 analysts, as you can see, these are the knights in gold, which I am a part of. So these team members are getting into this cyber warfare and analyzing the incident and the right way of response. The team member usually has high analytic capabilities, a good experience with different security systems, and that's actually, as a result, they need to collaborate between all these different security software to be able to determine the attack path, the campaign, and find the right indicators. And this team also is the focal point of different teams' collaboration. Usually here in this team, we start the true positive incidents, the real attack incidents, and then get all the other teams involved together. So this team also like manages and collecting all the information in one place from different teams. And then Nethaniel, your team.
Yes. So my team, the Cyber Threat Intelligence, they're represented by the wizard here. It's probably because no one really knows how we do what we do. But what we do basically is to compile and gather intelligence from many different sources. And by associating all the data and getting really into where we need to be and have all the visibility that we need in order to gather information and data and IOCs. So to provide all of that data to enrich and make sense of what's happening within the company. So basically looking outside to see how we can prevent or mitigate what's happening inside. To the next slide, please. Okay, and then we have the threat hunters, which are represented by the archer or a hunter. They use data that we gather, that cyber threat intelligence gathered in YARA rules and different mechanisms and resources in order to hunt what's happening inside of the network, hunting for IOCs, hunting for suspicious behaviors. So that's why the arrow really needs to land on the prey, on the malware that we're actually trying to find. And the DFIR specialists, they're represented here by the knifemen, because they have to really take all of the data or take a malware and dissect it. DFIR is basically forensics and incident response. So they need to take it and take it apart with their precision knives and see the malware analysis, extract more indicators, produce more artifacts, and we gather all of that data and then move it forward. So to you now, Mark.
Yep, and the last chapter here is the SIEM and EDR engineers. They're actually the blacksmith. They take all the information gathered during different incidents and trying to make the rules more accurate for next times or create new ones to detect it easily, because sometimes the incidents are starting with the CTI, and for next time we do want to detect it by ourselves as well. Yeah, we can go to the first scenario.
Yeah, so let's just dig in some deeper. So we'll go into the first scenario. Now you've understood the main actors. And now you're going to see some very interesting flow of how the teams work together to deliver an outcome.
So this specific scenario starts with the CTI team. So we were looking outside of the customer's perimeter. And we discovered that there was a server that was open publicly, and it contained hundreds of TXT files. And in each one of these files, there were hundreds of thousands of email addresses. And among all of these email addresses, we found that there were hundreds that belonged to one of our customers. So that's where we got a bit suspicious, and we didn't really know what we were dealing with. What are these emails doing here? What is this server used for? So we collected all of the information, including all of the email addresses of our customers, including the server's IP address, if there were any domains associated with it, and the reputation of the indicators. And with all of that data, we pass it forward to L2 to analyze the indicators.
Yeah, so getting all this information from the CTI is very important. Otherwise, we were not able to find this. So we took these IOCs, did some initial investigation on the IPs itself, find out that the actual IP is an email server. then we search for the IOCs in the environment of the customer. We actually were able to find a huge amount of emails sent for recent week to the customer from this IP. We were able to see the indicators of the subjects, attachments, and other stuff, which actually revealed that this is a phishing campaign. Also, we were able to find not only this specific IP, but we were able to see the same subnet sending very similar emails with similar subjects and similar sender name, which actually revealed that the phishing campaign is a bit larger than we thought. Of course, we took this information and the additional IPs, the email servers that were involved in this campaign, and moved it back to the CTI. By the way, can we jump to the next slide? Yeah. So once we did understand that this is pretty huge phishing campaign, we didn't want anybody to be affected. We did first an initial response and blocked the sender and the IPs we found, and moved forward all the information and the additional IPs back to the CTI to conduct some more information and investigation on it.
Well, this is actually an example of the emails that Mark found within our customers' network. It's kind of a generic spam email. There were a few variations of it. There were some other domains involved, but this is kind of what it looks like. So once we had all of that information from Mark, and that we knew that we were dealing with a spam campaign, that it was targeted, that a lot of the recipients were the customer itself. So we wanted to understand a couple of things. First of all, if we can see who is behind it, behind the spam campaign. So we can also find more indicators that we can provide afterwards to the L2 to make sure that we're totally protected against it. And also we search for the root cause of why were such a huge amount of email addresses that belong to our customers, why were they in a random open server? So we started to dig on the internet and many of the sources that we cover, and we found that in GitHub there was a repository that had in it a massive list of the customers' email addresses, and they were one by one the exact same emails that we have found in the open server. So we did the association, and obviously because the GitHub repository was publicly available, so someone gathered this list and added it to the target list of a spam campaign. In this case, it was a spam campaign, but the same list can be used also for obviously other purposes. And that's when we move forward.
Yeah, so actually this spam campaign also included in the emails the unsubscribe button. That was kind of phishing, because later on you need to provide your email address, phone number, and other stuff that actually have been sent finally to the holders of this campaign. And now when we have all this information, we're actually pretty close to end this incident as an incident. The SIEM engineer has a lot of information to work with, and in this case, like in many other cases, the attackers or the holders of these campaigns trying to make it in very low rate of emailing, so the default rules will not detect this as a phishing or as a huge amount of emails. They send it in a low rate, as well as using this technique of using not only one email server, but using a few servers, which usually pretty easy to identify using subnet, because usually they are in the same subnet. And that's what the SIEM engineer took here and created and adjusted the existing rules to be able to identify next time such activities, as for example, using searching for subnet, sending a lot of similar emails for a few days even.
So once we got all of that extra indicators, we were able to expand our research. And we wanted to see also if other of our customers were exposed or were being targeted by this spam campaign as the customer that we found in that server. So we searched for the server, we looked for other email addresses of our customers, and by looking at the spam emails that our customer was receiving, we were able to search for more indicators and see if there was any connection between those indicators and the other online assets of our customers. So at the end of the day, from detecting a few email addresses being exposed in a random server, we were able to provide the coverage and the protection to the rest of our customers. So that's how we kind of closed the circle here.
Yeah, and Nethaniel, one more point there. I do remember this in real life. You actually were able even to find the holders of this campaign.
Yes, actually, after some research, we were able to see who was the spammer. It happened to be a company that they kind of advertise themselves as doing marketing, but well, I guess this is a kind of marketing that they do, huge spam campaigns, and we were able to locate the server to someone. I mean, we got actually the name and last name of the holder back in India, and yeah, that was it. It was really interesting.
Great, thanks for that. And this is just to summarize the slide and how these different teams come together in order to do their investigation and hand off to different teams, and ultimately for a SIM expert to then be able to incorporate the lessons learned from that investigation into a detection rule that can then be used to mitigate any additional risk from that source in the future. So let's move on to the next scenario 2. So this is essentially another malware called CSIRT. It's used to sell employee credentials. This was another investigation that happened last year. So let's dive into that one.
All right. Thanks for the intro. So this incident also started with the CTI, with the intelligence team. By monitoring some of the dark web sources and hacking forums that we cover in the dark web and in the deep web, we saw that there was a threat actor that was offering for sale a huge amount. It was a few thousand of C-level and high-profile employee credentials for a lot of organizations from a specific industry. And we had strong suspicions based on the fact that we have customers in that sector. So we suspected that maybe one of our customers was compromised. However, we couldn't purchase really the database that this person was selling. As you can see here, this is the post in one of the hacking forums. We couldn't buy this, obviously, for many reasons. But we knew that this person, this threat actor, is known or actually asked to purchase a specific malware, that CSIRT malware, which is an information stealer. So we knew that he was using that to steal the credentials. So knowing that, I guess now is when we go to once we know, yes, thank you. Once we know that it's the CSIRT, which it's the malware is behind this. So we search for indicators from the malware, hashes, IP addresses, associated domains. So all of that, and we thought that probably the best thing to do is to make sure that our customer has not been infected by Azeroth. Because if we know that he wasn't infected by Azeroth, so the credentials were not stolen, or at least not in this instance. And once we had all of the indicators, a few Yara rules that we were able to compile, so we share that with the L1 analyst. The L1 analyst used all of the tools that they have access to, like the email gateways and firewalls, to see if there were any hits from the Azeroth malware in the customer's network. And once they did that investigation, they escalated to the L2 analyst to Mark.
Yeah, so since we're in this step where we still not got any indicator of compromise, we took all the IOCs, implemented them in EDR solutions, and implemented a few appropriate detection rules, which are a bit more generic than specific IOCs, and actually moved it forward to the threat hunter to make sure the hunting is not revealing something. So can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so the threat hunter took the Yara that were actually provided by the CTI previously and adjusted it a bit to be more accurate on the one hand, and on the other hand to be a bit more generic, to find even new variants of this malware. As you may know, malwares are often being updated and changed in order to avoid the signature-based detection. So the Yara rules were implemented for search in the network. Some recommendations were provided for the C-levels, MFA, some accounts that we might think they may have been involved in this campaign, as well as L1. Meanwhile, we're doing some UBA, user behavior analytics, trying to detect any C-levels accounts behaving anomaly, and finally resetting their password just as a proactive measure. And finally, the DFIR gets into this incident as well, because he's the one that can take this malware, the new variants, conduct the research and make sure that we are able to implement behavior detections and make sure that we do detect this malware once it gets into the environment.
Great. So yeah, this is just also as a summary, and you can see that this particular investigation was much more complex in some ways in terms of involving many different teams. Mark, maybe just briefly, can you just give some insight into this this type of approach as to compared with basically just working L1, L2 teams working together?
Yeah, generally I would divide it into two steps. Usually the first step is the initial response, which is done by L1 and L2, identifying that this is a real threat, a real attack, and making the first response measure, which is usually in worst case, and in this case, it will be actually a quarantine a server or an endpoint in case of the indicator of compromise was found, which should be a bit faster when you work in L2 and L1, because then you make off the load from L1, giving it to L2 to handle the serious incidents. So this is the first step, and then you have the next step when you can be a bit more relaxed, checking that this malware was not spread to other endpoints, and then going forward and investigating where it came from, why it was executed, how it was executed, what it tried to do, and on. So here you can be a bit more relaxed and take it a bit more time. So usually the first step will take up to 20 minutes, which is a very critical time. And the second step, investigating, making new rules, the FIR hunting and other stuff may take more time, even a few hours, up to 1 day. But that's fine, because we're actually in a stage where we're fine with the malware not being spread in the environment. If we compare it to a more generic stocks where you have less teams, as usual, tier 1, tier 2, then you have much more load on L1 firstly, and then they're less likely to find these indicators as fast as possible. And as well, L1, L2 then able to investigate deeply this incident, while the other teams like the CTI, threat hunting, and other stuff, other team is taking their approaches and helping to handle this incident as fast as possible. So yeah, in a different place, it may take much more time and not always end in such a nice way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the key KPIs that we measure is actually something called dwell time, which is the amount of time it takes before an incident actually is then dealt with. As you mentioned, Mark, critical time is within those first few minutes, so that you can quickly escalate and make progress in that critical time. So thank you. So yeah, the final scenario is an EDR detection of ISID Trojan infection. So let's take a look at that one now.
Yeah, so unlike other scenarios, this scenario actually starts with a detection, and it's a bit different from other scenarios we showed previously, because here actually in each step we'll know more information and we'll find more information, unlike when CDI actually usually finds all the information at the first step. Here we're able to get more and more information and involve more teams to help this incident to proceed. And this is, I believe, is one of the most complicated out of these three incidents. So the incident starts with L1 detecting an alert from one of the EDRs, detecting a cobble strike, which is very generic and used in a lot of attacks, injecting to another process. Here you can see the CNC connection, which was found by this process as well. And actually at this stage, when they could find models of cobble strike and malicious CNC connection, they are able to escalate it to L2. By the way, this screenshot was done after the incident, because at the time of the incident, this file was not known in the wild. So we can see that the file cobble strike detection was masqueraded, named as EdgeNose, and using fake metadata. This is not real Guardian robotic, a known masquerading technique. As well, we are able to see later on when investigating this file in the DFIR that he had a few other names in other campaigns. One of them was using WinInit, which is trying to masquerade after WinInit operation system process and evade the security software. Yeah, so when L2 getting this incident, we're getting a bit more deeply investigating the malware executable. Of course, quarantine the machine and checking that ensuring that the malware was not spread to other machines in any way. So while we investigating the file itself, we're able to see where we try to actually find out how the file came, and we are able to find an email that came to this machine with an attachment that actually was holding a word with a macro enabled inside. Investigating the macro, we could see that it's trying to communicate with one of the IPs. In the next slide, where I actually can see one of the scripts that it tried to download, which is obfuscated, of course, but we could see some hints of the deobfuscation, used the CyberShift tool to deobfuscate, and we're able to see an IP that was related to this campaign. So investigating further, in the next slide, we can see some screenshots checking this IP and able to see that a lot of cobble strike shells and other malwares were related to this IP, as well as using Intezer as a nice source, online source. You can see there it's comparing gens and code reuse. So we're able to see CobbleStrike and Meterpreter there. And in the bottom right screenshot, we're able to see the malicious macro function, which actually tries to open the macro to run the macro once the document is opened. Again, nothing new, very known techniques for a lot of other campaigns. Yeah, and we can go to the next slide. So getting all this information and the IPs we could find, including the indicators, hashes, and other stuff, we're moving forward to the CTI to try to understand what is this about.
Yes, so when we received that, first of all, just by analyzing the email, the actual email that was received, that had the zip file attached. So just by knowing the name even of the attachment request.zip, that's a classic example of an ICED Trojan. And also the content of the email, if I'm not wrong, also the password for the zip file is in the text of the email. That's also very classic ICED. So at least we're able to identify it. We saw that there was an ongoing campaign for the ICED doing several things. The ICED software was malware was used also as a loader for other ones. So it was something that we really wanted to make sure that we're covering the best way possible, and we take it very seriously. So with the file hash that was extracted from the file, we were able to, from there, jump to another one. Sorry, can we go to the previous? Yeah, thank you. With the file that we had, the hash, the indicator, so we were able to this way find IP addresses and domains and gather a really large list of IOCs from the current campaign of ICED. And we share this with all of the relevant teams, with L1, L2, and the DFIR as well. And they escalated it to the customer. And once he got the customers, they were able to action it. And Mark.
Yeah, so meanwhile, CTI is doing the investigation. L2 found out that this attack flow was trying to install a backdoor as well, an NCS backdoor, a very old one, but working one. And all this information, including the CTI, was moved to the DFIR, trying to conduct remote analysis on the endpoint, in this case using the EDR solution, extracting some more artifacts that were found, trying to make sure that no data was exfiltrated, since ICED is a very aggressive banking Trojan. And later on involving the threat hunter with all the IOCs. We can go to the next slide. Yep, so involving the threat hunter, using all the IOCs and the information gathered previously, we're able to find an SQLite DLL, for example, in a temp folder, which the SQLite itself was not installed on the machine. So this actually is a legitimate DLL, but it's often used by ICED and other banking Trojans to query the browser's password vaults, which we're all using to store our passwords, which is not that safe. Yeah, and finally going to the SIM engineer, holding all this information, an interesting incident, a major one, reviewing the incident, taking all the IOCs and the behaviors, conducting rules fine-tuning in places we can, and creating even new rules to make sure we detect specific behavior of banking Trojans. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for that. That's great. And yeah, again, this is a slide just really summarizing the flow between the various teams. So we're almost out of time, and we would like to allocate time for any questions. So really, just to give you some takeaways, some key takeaways, and one of the things we see time and again is that a collaborative response makes our investigations and our mitigation steps so much more effective. So, integrations with data sources and technologies is really key. We have in the case of Cyberproof, we have a centralized platform that allows collaboration between teams in real time. When I say teams, it's not just the Cyberproof experts, but also the customers. We obviously want to capture the relevant data for future improvements in terms of new use cases and rules that can then obviously improve our detection going forward. We obviously want to be able to prioritize time, effort, and resources based on those insights. So it's a feedback loop, constant feedback loop that is given back to the various experts. And we find that having a hybrid engagement model really does help organizations to get to the right outcome as quickly as possible. So please, we hope you found this session useful. And if you have any questions, we'll be very happy to take them now.
Okay, great. Thank you both. So a couple of questions for you, and I think it's definitely one that's been very relevant for us all recently, considering everything that's been going on from COVID, but generally, we all work in different silos as well. So can you kind of talk to us about how you, in all of these different teams within your capability, whether or not it's DFIR, incident response, CTI, how you come together, how you collaborate, not just in terms of data and information and aggregating that within a platform, but how you talk, how you come together to hypothesize and do, kind of whiteboard stuff as well. So how have you been coping with that, especially around incident response as well?
Yeah, so let me answer this one. You need to have some kind of a collaboration platform, as some of the teams are really global and working in different places. So you need to have some kind of a platform where you can put all the information gathered, and this platform should be secured. So I know that some places using just chats, not the best practice, but still a place that you can put all the information together. It's not only helping the different teams to collaborate and share their findings pretty quick, making everybody is aware of the findings and the current status of the incident. But also in the end of the incident, you need somehow to collect all this information, put it in a report, as well as inform the customer in some cases. So yeah, we're using our own platform, but I know there are other platforms as well. It's very important to gather all the information in one place, in a safe place, with sensitive information. So yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. And Nathaniel, you're the CTI guy, so you're obviously the rock star within your organization and everyone wants to be you. In terms of your role and CTI specifically, I think from the last talk and this talk, we've had a little bit around, CTI predominantly supporting incident response. Where else are you seeing CTI adding value or being the enabler or being the precursor to drive other types of security derived types operations, whether or not that's strategy, roadmap, defense, whatever it might be?
Well, that's a really, really interesting question. So as you could see in the presentation, CTI really is the trigger in many cases of the incident response process, but also enriches a lot of what's happening. And you find something inside and you want to know what's happening, so that's when the CTI comes in. And in the strategy, I think more and more you can see that organizations are basing how they see their processes based on what the CTI is able to provide. So the CTI really became a part of this whole process of planning. And I think more and more that's what we're going to be seeing, as the CTI at the end of the day is the one that I wouldn't say has the last word, but has the most interesting word, that's for sure. So yeah, and we also cover more and more sources every day, and we use more and more tools and more capabilities. So definitely the CTI, not only in our company, but globally, I think it's taking a more predominant job, really, in the cybersecurity process. And I'm just really excited about it, you know. So yeah, I think that's really it.
Good. Intelligence-driven operations is definitely the way we want the world to go. So you were talking about tools and stuff that you're using. Just to hit you with a question, if I was to say to you, what are the top 3 go-to CTI tools for supporting incident response? What would you say?
Nice. Okay. So VirusTotal, obviously, that's a basic one. They are also developing so many new capabilities, and that's really helpful and really interesting stuff that you can find there. I'm not going to say any names of other tools, but we have a lot of tools that we use that monitor the deep and dark web sources that automate a lot of our processes. And that's really, really awesome for us because it really saves a lot of time. And it's able to give us an interesting insight also in what's happening. And my favorite, and I think a lot of people will also agree, is at the end of the day, Google. If you know how to use Google properly, so you really, that's at least 60% of your job done. So I would recommend everyone to spend all the time needed in using Google on a professional way. And I'm not being paid by Google, by the way, but I think that Google really gives you much more than you can think.
Yeah. I think, yes, it's definitely underrated. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what what tool sets you've got, what subscriptions you've got. And we see this true of security operations, right? It doesn't matter how much you spend unless you've got skilled human beings who are well trained using them. Then what's the point in having them? And Google and Dorking and just being able to run proper search strings across whatever tool it is a skill in itself and totally underrated. So I cannot disagree with you any more with that. It looks like we don't have any more questions. Mark, is there anything else that you wanted to jump in on at all?
Yeah, if I may, just to add one more role of the CTI that I can see more and more recently during the major incidents that are often unknown in the wild campaigns yet. So collecting all the new observables that are not known in the wild for new campaigns, and I'm pretty sure that then the CTI shares it either with all other customers or even in open source threat intelligence sources to be used for other teams, which is very important in the war with the hackers and the attackers. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you both very much. Appreciate that. So that brings us to the end of session 2 on Stream 2. We're going to take a approximate 7-minute break now before we move on to session 3, which is I Can't Get No Stakeholder Satisfaction. Always after a catchy title there, optimizing feedback in the intelligence lifecycle. So we're going to put up a screen now and we'll see you all back here very shortly. Thank you both again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.